Tonight we are going to talk about the promises that were made to Abraham. Pretty basic lesson. I'm sure you guys, I'm not going to tell you probably anything new. Maybe some details you may not have known before or thought about in a long time. So we'll just kind of go through this. This is what Abraham looked like. It's an actual photo of him. No. That's somebody's idea of what Abraham might have looked like. Abraham lived in a area called Ur. Oh, it's right there if you're looking on the map. A lot of times we refer to that as Ur of the Chaldees. Now, you're wondering, well, what's the Chaldees? Well, the Chaldees, we're not 100% sure of how it was used back then, because we're talking about 4,000 years ago. But there's two things that have been put forth. One is that region that town was in, that's what they called that region, the Chaldees. Or it could be that the people that lived there, they called those people the Chaldees. Don't really know which one, but either one would work, right? Or both of them together would be fine too. But that's where that Ur of the Chaldees thing comes from. So it was a big time town back then. This is out of an old book. You can see because I had to splice it together. It was of its day a super modern town. Probably as awesome as you could get back then. Back in the 1920s, they were able to excavate this area, and from that time on, there's been a lot of excavation done in this area. Today, it's in modern day Iraq, but there was a lot of archaeological work that was done there. This shows, today some of the things that they've excavated. You can probably see this thing back up here. I got a close-up picture of that. That's this ziggurat of Ur. Not 100% sure what this was. Some people think it was like a place of worship to whatever god they had. Some people say it was like a place where like the city administration took place. But it was an important place. Now, this structure is not necessarily 4,000. The foundation's 4,000 years old, but over time, there was a lot of renovations that were done to this thing. Like even, at the time of the divided kingdoms, there was a renovation that was done to this. But it was a structure that's been there for a long time. As they were excavating those areas, one of the things that's interesting to note is they found all kinds of stone tablets with writing on them, which indicates that we're talking about a civilized society. They had the ability to write down their language and preserve it, and we can read it today. They were extremely advanced society. They had a version of the Pythagorean theorem back in this day, thousands of years ago. They had an understanding of Euclidean geometry. You probably may not be familiar with that, but if you had geometry class in high school, that's what you studied. Right? That's the fancy name for the geometry we studied. This is dealing with geometry on a flat plane, just basic geometry. But they understood all of that stuff. So they had a lot of knowledge that sometimes we think of as being more modern. They had a lot of knowledge. I'll go back to this picture of this. I mean, that doesn't look that old. That's thousands of years old. They had arched doorways. I mean, we think about stuff like it, and you notice it's like nice and straight and square. So they had some knowledge. They were artists, right? We found some art stuff there. They had everything that you would expect in an advanced society. And so Abraham lives there with his family, and for some reason they decided to leave there. They decided to leave Ur, and they went up to Haran. Now, I always thought that they left Ur because God told them to leave Ur, but when I read the Bible, it doesn't seem like it's that way. Here it says, Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot. So Terah is Abram's dad, right? He took his grandson Lot, and the reason he took him is because Lot's father had died, and his daughter-in-law Sarah, the wife of his son Abraham, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. So for some reason, they left that area, and they went to this other area, and they stayed there for quite a while. Not sure exactly how long. So this map kind of details that. So they leave Ur down here. Now, anybody remember what Mesopotamia means? Yep, that's the land between the rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris River. So they leave Ur and they come up here to Haran, and they stay there for a while. And that is the place where God appears to Abram when he's at Haran. It says, the Lord said to Abraham, he says, go from your country, your people, your father's household, to a land I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. So Abraham went as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out of Haran. So God appears to Abraham at Haran. For some reason I had it mixed up in my mind that he appeared to him at Ur. Maybe you had that same feeling, but it's something that I kind of thought, but as I was studying this, I'm like, oh, I've misunderstood this for a long time. He makes these three promises, and of course, he reiterates these three promises, 5 times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different times in Genesis. God reiterates these promises that he has given him. The first one is that he's going to give him a land somewhere. There's going to be some property involved. Somehow he's going to become a great nation, right? And somehow through him all the families of the earth are going to be blessed. I'm sure Abraham didn't understand why all of those things were given to him. Is our invitation song Trust and Obey? Isn't that interesting? Yeah, trust and obey. So that's kind of what Abraham did, right? He trusted in God and he obeyed what he said. When they go into Canaan, he finds a bunch of Canaanites there. Isn't that a surprise? Right? That's where the word Canaan comes from these people that were Canaanites that lived there. Well, this map just shows a bunch of the different cities that he would have kind of ran into along that time. Pretty heavily settled area. Of course, when we're talking about Canaan, what we're talking about is one of the sons of Ham. Remember, Noah had 3 sons, right? Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So Ham had some sons, and one of those sons was Canaan. And those descendants settled in this area. And we refer to all of these people here in the purple. We refer to those people as Canaanites, regardless of what they referred to themselves. Just as a group, we call them Canaanites. They're all descended from Ham. So, Abraham and Lot leave Haran, and they travel on down into the land of Canaan. And Abraham and Lot, their main business is they're shepherds. They've got a lot of different livestock and different animals that they're taking care of. And they're blessed because those things keep growing. They keep getting bigger and bigger. And one thing about having a lot of livestock is it takes a lot of food for them. So they're going to have to keep moving, right? They're not planting crops. They're not doing a crop rotation there like we would here. So when the grass runs out, they move. Well, eventually there comes a famine. So they all leave Canaan and they go down to Egypt. And this is the first time where Abram tells a little lie, right? He lies about his wife being his sister. And he's kind of shown the way out of Egypt because of that, because of some calamities that come to him. So he goes back there and he returns back to the land of Canaan. Now, Abraham and Lot, they've traveled together for a long time, but what has happened is they've acquired so much livestock and they've got so many people there with them, they start to fight. My son Charlie was telling me this weekend, we were talking about, he was thinking about, starting a little business with a friend of his. And I said, son, don't do that. And the reason is because those things, especially when you're a teenager, usually don't end well. I said, you still want to be friends with this guy? He said, yeah. I said, well then, don't do this. You want to start a business, you start your own business. Leave him out of it. Well, kind of what happened here. So you got Lot and Abraham, they're together. They're kind of in the same business. And as a group, they start fighting with each other. The people that work for Lot start fighting with people that work for Abraham. And Abraham says, listen, we got to split up. Now, Lot is the younger nephew. And you would think, so if Abraham went to Lot and said, you choose which way you want to go, you would think that Lot would have said, oh no, you're the elder, you tell me which way to go. But Lot didn't do that. Lot looked around and he saw some pretty nice looking property and he said, I think we're going to go over there. So he goes over to Sodom. And we don't know where Sodom was at, or Gomorrah, for sure. The Bible indicates it was a land where there was lots of grass and could support lots of livestock. If you were to look at that today, it doesn't look so much like it could do that, but apparently at that time it was. If I was making a guess, there's a couple of rivers that run through these mountains and go into the Dead Sea. I would have to guess, well, those towns had to have been close to those fresh water sources, I would imagine, but there's really no way to know for sure. There was a town that they escaped to later on called Zor, and they found that, and that's in that, it's right here, it's down here, so we know we're kind of in the right area, but we don't exactly know where Sodom and Gomorrah were. But anyways, Lot goes over there, him and his family, and they settle over there. I think what happened too is Lot ends up having some buyer's remorse because he goes over there, and Lot, the Bible says Lot was a godly man, and being around all those sinful people was definitely hard on him. So, maybe it wasn't the best choice. Well, time goes on a little ways, and remember we talked about them being from Mesopotamia, where some of the kings from Mesopotamia decided to get together and form a little coalition. And what they were going to do is they were going to come down into Canaan and do some raids, right? So they could come down there and get some booty like the pirates would do. They'd go down there and take whatever they want. So they have these 4 kings and their armies, and we have the aggressors listed there, and then a group of kings from Canaan get together, and they have a big fight, and they're defeated. And then the kings of Mesopotamia, they continue on. They go to where Lot and his family's at in Sodom. They take them away. They continue their raid, and they head back north, and they've got all of the people and all of the things they took, and probably herds of cattle and everything. And they get up here around Dan, and Abraham hears about it, and he's not happy about it. So he gets 318 of his favorite guys together, guys that work for him apparently, and they go up there and they defeat those 4 kings of Mesopotamia. And they take all of the stuff back. Then on their way back home, they stop at Jerusalem, and that's where we read about Melchizedek, right? He gives a tenth of all of those things to Melchizedek as a gift. So that's where we read about all of those things that happen. So Lot and his family go back to Sodom, where they came from, and I believe Abraham went back to Hebron, right? Which was sometimes referred to as the Oaks of Mamre, and if you're reading through the Old Testament. Now, God had promised that out of Abraham there was going to be this great nation. But there was one problem, is him and Sarah didn't have any kids, and they couldn't figure out how this was going to happen. So they decided to take matters into their own hands, and Sarah has this handmaid. Her name's Hagar, and Abraham takes her as a wife. And as you can imagine, things went really nice after that. Boy, it just was smooth sailing. No. Things went bad in a hurry until Hagar and her baby have to leave. Sarah's had enough of this. And they kind of go out, and God appears to her and he says, listen, go back and just do whatever she says. And that's what she does. And everything, from all accounts, seems like it's going okay until Ishmael, her son, is about 14 years old. And of course, at that point, Sarah has Isaac, and they separate again. Right, so there's two different separations of Hagar and Ishmael. While they're there, this incident where these angels come, and they're going to go destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And of course, Abraham's got a little concerned about that because his nephew's over there. And he tries to make some deals with God. Well, you know, if there's 50 righteous, will you destroy the city? And he works it down to 10. If you find 10 righteous, and God says, oh, I won't destroy it if I can find 10 righteous. But the problem was, when he went there, he couldn't find 10 righteous. He could only find 5 righteous. So the city's going to be destroyed. So Lot and his wife and his daughters, they escape and go to Zor. Right? And the next day, God rains fire and brimstone down on Sodom and Gomorrah. And when they're leaving there, they weren't supposed to look at what was going on. But Lot's wife couldn't resist the temptation. I've often wondered about what motivated her to do that. Was it just ignorance? She didn't believe that God would punish them for doing what he said not to do? Or was it, she was longing for the things that she had back there? Was it curiosity? I don't know. But the fact remains that she did what she wasn't supposed to. And she paid for that with her life, right? So there's a lesson for us in that as well. So Lot and his daughters are saved. Now, he ends up having 2 children, incestuous children with his daughters. And that's later on in the land of Canaan. We read about the Moabites and the Ammonites, right? You'll see there were 3 groups. They would be, if you're looking at the Dead Sea, they would be to the east of the Dead Sea. I think maybe I have a map. Yeah, so the Ammonites settle like here, the Moabites here, and the Edomites, which were the descendants of Esau, they settle down here. Right, so they're kind of around that lower area, down through here. So that's where we get those names from. So from Lot's daughters, the Ammonites and the Moabites. So Abraham, it's a little bit later on, Abraham decides to go over to Gerar. That's where, remember, we read about Abimelech, and he was the king over there. And of course, I can say is, when you read this, Sarah must have been a good-looking lady, because 2 different times she goes to foreign lands, and the king's like, I want her in my harem. That happens twice. So whatever I know this is kind of funny. I look at this picture of Sarah here. I don't think that's what she looked like. I don't think that's what she looked like at all. I think she was probably very, very beautiful lady. And Abraham knew that, right? And so again, he lies again about being his wife or being his sister, and the same thing basically happens. They're sent away. This time they're sent away with some different gifts that he gives them. So Sarah eventually does have a child, right? We all know about that, about Isaac. And Isaac comes to age and he needs a wife. So Abraham decides that, well, maybe do I have these in the wrong? No, but I'm talking about the wrong thing. All right, let's talk about that. So Abraham has Isaac, and God tells Isaac, or God tells Abraham that he needs to offer Isaac as a sacrifice. And so they leave Beersheba, and they're going to go to Moriah, Mount Moriah, and that's where this is going to take place. If you look at the scale of miles, it's probably 50 miles at least over there. Now, you ever walk 50 miles? Don't take a little bit, right? Probably going to take at least 2 days, right? If you're a good walker. If you got a big group of people and animals, it might take longer than that. Here's the thing I always think about with this story. Abraham, he knows what's going to happen. There's this burden of the knowledge of what's going to happen, what he's got to do. He's walking for days with his son. His son doesn't know. I can't imagine the weight of all of that must have been on his mind as he went through this. You know, just this whole thing. He knows what he's got to do. He can't tell anybody. He's bearing this whole burden by himself. And of course they get up there, and Isaac carries the wood up there. He asks his dad about the sacrifice. And then the other thing is Isaac submits to being tied down, right? He's a willing participant in this, and we can't forget that too. I'm sure that Isaac, being a strong young man, probably could have gave his dad a lot of trouble physically if he wanted to, but he doesn't do that. And of course, God withholds his hand, and at that time, God knows that Abraham has put 100% of his trust in God. It was a test, right? And he provides sacrifice. Now we're talking about Isaac getting a wife. So all of that goes past, and Isaac's getting a little bit long in the tooth. I think he was about 40 years old, and they decided that he needed a wife. So Abraham didn't want to get a wife for him from those Canaanites that they were living around. So he said, you know what, you need to go back to Haran, where we originally, remember where Abraham, they left Ur and went to Haran? Well, one of Abraham's brothers stayed there. He said, go back there and get a wife from our family. We don't want to mix with these Canaanites. So Abraham's brother Nahor had stayed there, and he had a granddaughter named Rebecca. So if you know that story, so they went, Abraham sends his servants up there, and his servant returns with Rebecca. Awesome story. Could spend the whole time just talking about that one event or any of these events, but that's the family tree, so we kind of know what we're talking about. And Rebecca returns, and Isaac has a couple of children with her, right? Jacob and Esau. And by Jacob, their son, they have 12 other sons, right? And through those sons comes Jesus, right? And when we talk about the three promises, this way that the whole world will be blessed through him, that's how it's done. It's done through Jesus. And today we have that blessing through Jesus because, listen, without Jesus, there's no way that we could be reconciled back to God, because every person in this room is a sinner, and that means we've broken God's law, and what we deserve is hell, right? Because we We need to follow what God told us to do. But through Jesus' sacrifices, paying for our sins on the cross, we can be reconciled back to God and be part of God's family. And Matt picked out the song Trust and Obey, and that's a perfect song for this lesson, because certainly that was an illustration of the life of Abraham. He trusted God. When God told him to do something, he did it. So he trusted him and he obeyed him all the time, right? And for us today, we need to trust God in the same way, and we need to trust that that the sacrifice of Jesus and being baptized into Christ is the way that we can have our sins forgiven. We need to obey. That's our obedience. In fact, I probably said this a million times, but there's two parts of salvation, right? There's one part that God did, right? He set this whole system up. You think about the Bible story. God makes those 3 promises to Abraham. The rest of the Bible, from Genesis 12 all the way to Revelation, is the fulfillment of those promises. That's what the Bible is about, right? So we need to believe those things, right? We need to be willing to obey those things. God put this in place. That's his part. And our part is to be obedient. So if there's anyone this evening who has not put on Christ in baptism, we offer the invitation this evening. If anyone has a need, we ask you to come forward while we stand and while we sing.